You got one life, for crying out loud. You might as well just give it all you got.
The Deej, Dan Jourdan.
Your daily dose of reality. Your daily dose of the Deej.
I can't believe I'm saying this, but I need my daily dose of the Deej.
I make the news. I don't watch the news. I'm a leader.
The Sales Energizer, Dan Jourdan.
Listen, don't worry how to sell, baby. Worry about why people buy. And it's fun.
You don't need a 5-hour energy. All you need is the Sales Energizer.
Just when I think it's not going to be as fun as the one before, each one gets successfully better. Success. What's the word I'm looking for? What's it going to take to get you into this car today, huh?
And now, please welcome the Sales Energizer, Dan Jourdan.
Boom! That's exactly it.
Do that. Let's do that. All right, let's do that.
Let's do it.
Wait a minute. You're not Dan Jourdan.
What? Oh, we must be on the wrong podcast.
Oh, wow. Joe, welcome to the show. Thanks for filling that seat, and thanks for making this show better than it ever has been to date.
I'm not going to say that. I love Dan Jourdan so much. That little clip there got me fired up.
That's the idea. That's the idea. Get him fired up, get things warmed up. We're about to have a show. And even though it did say Dan Jourdan, ladies and gentlemen, that is Joe Miller making me look invisible on the left side of your screen today. And so if you're joining us on any of the tubes, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, we're going to find some other place to cram this show so you can view this thing today. But we have a special guest host in Joe Miller today. Joe, you're in Texas.
I am. I'm
today,
in
and Dan had a personal thing to attend to, and so the show must go on. And again, I can't wait for this show to be better than it ever has.
If that happens, I'm going to definitely rub it in a lot.
That's the idea, right? That is the idea.
But no, I'm happy to fill in for Dan. I'm very honored, actually, to even be able to stand here and talk to you.
Awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, as always, when we run the show, we run this thing live. So, feel free to chime in. And so, Joe, I know we've got a guest that you're familiar with and that you've met. And, I can tell already that the show is going to be better than any Dan Jourdan live, and this is only the third time I've said that, just because I want to just, you got to get it inspired. But, Dan and I, as you probably know, do about this much prep work for the show, and most of the time that just makes it better. It makes things fresh, and I think people enjoy that sort of live energy, right? That the Sales Energizer show, and so that live energy can really turn into something that is great, and certainly it allows other people who are viewing, like right now on on all these places on LinkedIn, go ahead and chime in and let us know where you're joining us from today. But that live energy really can catapult a show into something great. And so I'll roll it over to you to introduce our guest today, because I'm excited to get things rolling.
Okay, great. Well, the name of the gentleman who's going to be joining us today is Randy Crawford. Randy is the president of a company called Restor Metabolix. And I met Randy, of all places, at a sales conference. And we went and had lunch, and he started talking about this thing he's working on, this diabetes therapy. And I got really intrigued by it. I'm a practicing diabetic myself, so I got very intrigued by it. And then I started to started to call Randy, like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? And eventually we got together and started working together. But I wanted people to know that there's something else out there. There's another modality, something else to think about, because diabetes is a pretty nasty disease. It's pretty insidious. It pretty much wrecks every system in the body, and it's rampant throughout the United States, actually in the world. And I thought this might be a good opportunity to just get Randy on here, tell him how he got here, tell him what the therapy's about. And then if it's something for them, then it's something for them.
All right. So let's get him on, and we'll without further ado, would you please welcome to the stage of Joe Miller Live, Mr. Randy Crawford. Look at that. He's got his
There we go.
arms
He's
ready.
got it. He's
ready to-
pumping it.
Sun's out, guns out, Randy.
That's
How
right.
you
Good
doing?
afternoon, guys.
Hey, Randy.
How are you?
I'm good. You did that in full Deej fashion right there. That
That's
was
right.
good.
That's right.
You'll be happy.
Didn't want to disappoint.
Well, if it's okay if I start off, Chris, I always think of the beginning of the story of origin. Like, every superhero, I'll call you a superhero, Randy, has their story of origin, right? They start somewhere. Spider-Man gets bit by a spider, those type things. So that's kind of where I want to start is what is the story of origin for Randy Crawford and how did we get here?
So we only have an hour, so I'll make it short. So I was going to school to be a nurse and went through the whole process. And so from CNA, LPN, RN, got my bachelor's degree, eventually into became a nurse practitioner, and finally got my dream job working with cardiology patients. And so I had patients just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patients. Our practice was growing. We were getting 100 referrals a week. We were doing really well, and we were taking on a lot of patients. We were doing a lot of good. And so my family has a tremendous history with heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, the whole gamut. And so for one of my family members, there was only so much I could do. We could stent whatever. We sent this family member already to have coronary artery bypass grafts, open heart surgery. We had done that and done stents on top of it. But with the microvascular disease, we just could not do anything with. We had put him on the drug du jour at the time and run it way up past the dosage that was recommended. He would get some relief, but he would continue to have to take nitro tabs all the time. And so it was like there was no way I could get him the relief he needed. And we'd stent. I mean, we was at a point where we was every 90 days, we were back in the cath lab with him. And so one thing happened, another. My kids were growing up. I was working an hour from home one way. And so it's like, okay, I got to come home. And within a short period of time of moving, or not moving, but moving my job back to my hometown, I really and truly lost my mind and decided to apply for a job as the CEO of a small rural hospital. Well, when I say lost my mind, absolutely lost my mind. That will drive you crazy. That there's too much bureaucracy there. My hat goes off to all of the people who do that. I recommend that for anybody else but somebody named Randy Crawford. It is not my cup of tea. So while I was there, I had I guess it was a novel idea at the time, was to actually work on, instead of doing sick care, do preventative care and take a patient in and let's start early on looking for different ways that we could take care of patients. So some of the things that were happening to my family, would not happen to their family or to that patient themselves. So as I was developing this process, with the doctors that were working with me, we had some reps that come in that did different things. One guy came in and says, we talked a lot, kind of like you and I, Joe, and he said, "Hey man, I've heard of this thing out in Houston. I don't know if it's right. I don't know if it's good. I don't know anything about it, but I've heard of it. It's worth me going out to see. If there's something to it, I'm going to fly out there. And if there is, I'm going to come back and I'll let you know." He said, "If it is, from what I've heard, it goes right along with what you're trying to do, Randy. And I think it'd be good for what you're doing here at the hospital." I said, "Okay, well, just let me know." So this is in January of 2020. Guess what happened in March?
Yeah. World fell apart,
The
right?
world shut down. Mm-hmm. And so the rep came back, who's a good friend of mine now, and said, "Hey, this is amazing. You got to look at it." We had some phone calls and Zooms and what have you. And I knew I wanted to do it, just couldn't. I mean, we were doing everything we could to, take care of patients, and just like every other hospital was. And so by the time November of that year got there, there was a lull in like the COVID waves or whatever that were coming through our town. And so we finally had a face-to-face. I took a team out that consisted of an internal medicine doc. I'm a nurse practitioner. I took another nurse practitioner, an RN, or actually 2 RNs, a pharmacist. We all went out, sat through the training, and said, if there's something to it, we'll bring it back, put it in the hospital. If there's not, thank you. We had a trip to Houston. By lunchtime, we were all like, oh, yeah, we're in. This is a big deal. And so I knew from the research I had done prior that if this would work in the micro vessels and the treatment would work in the micro vessels, then there was an opportunity for me to help my family member that was struggling. And so that's kind of what hooked me in. I understood the pathophysiology of everything and how it should work and how pancreas should deliver insulin. I mean, there's very basic science that we're talking about here that everybody gets in the 10th grade biology book. There's nothing special about what we're talking about. And so I was in, and I was like, okay, so that makes sense. And so what we were able to do is to see if we could deliver, an insulin the same way the pancreas did, then we could see some results kind of like a normal patient or a normal pancreas would see. And so we thought about it. We said, yeah, we're in. We want to do this. And so we were the first hospital in the country to put it in. And then within several months, we were doing very well. And it come up time for some discussions about contract and things like that for me, and it was just time for me to move on. And so I left. I still had all my licenses, and my goal was to take this product, this modality, and just open up locations in towns where I knew that the diabetes was rampant, which basically is from California to the East Coast, especially in the South. This thing affects about 25% of the country.
Wow.
In one way or the other, the pre-diabetic type 1 or type 2. And these patients, and that's what we know of from the CDC, and that's what's been diagnosed. So this is an enormous problem. And diabetes affects every organ, every system in the body. And so that's
really a good point, because I mean, you think of, like I said, I'm a practicing diabetic. You think, oh, I got high sugar, I got high blood sugar, and I didn't know for a long time I even had it. I felt okay. I didn't feel, but then when you start looking at the damage it causes, then you get really concerned.
Yeah. So anyway, we got started. I left the hospital, and the guys from Restore, we had built a relationship by that time, and I had some ideas about what we could do, and they did as well. I gave them a synopsis of what I thought we could do, a game plan and a time frame, and they liked that. I basically left the meeting and said, okay, that's great. I wasn't necessarily looking for a job. And then I got a call a few days later, and they said, hey, we think you would be great to be the president of this company. We like your vision. We like what you think you can do, and yada, yada, yada. So I got in, got started. It took me about 6 months to kind of get everything in place and get going. And then in March of last year, everything really started to happen. And since that time, we've opened 33 locations throughout the country.
Wow.
All taking care of diabetic patients the way we do it.
Wow. Randy, on this origin story thing, there's always a point where the hero has a revelation, a moment when they go, yeah, this is going to work. And they're convicted by that. Was there a moment like that for you? Like you saw a patient, or you had a moment that you said, yeah, I got to really do this?
My moment really was when we were in Houston, and I was able to talk to the patients in that clinic. The science made sense. I mean, the numbers worked, the patho worked, the science just made sense to me. But when you actually get to sit down and talk to a patient that says, hey, I've been coming for, 3 weeks now, and I've had 5 treatments, and I came in and I couldn't feel my feet because of the peripheral neuropathy that I've had in my feet. And now all of a sudden I can feel them again.
Right.
That's a change.
Right.
I was like, really? And she said, yes, sir. I've only been coming 5 times. And they told me this would happen, but it's only been 5 treatments and I'm already feeling my feet again. Now that's not a big deal for those of us who don't understand that. But if you can't feel where your feet's going, you're very likely to trip. If you're female, a little older, got some osteoporosis issues, that's a broken hip or a broken shoulder. So there's a lot of other confounding issues that happen with peripheral neuropathy, especially when it comes to diabetes and what's going to happen with all these problems. So it's a big deal. And so just by being able to talk to those patients, there was like, yeah, I'm doing this. If this can work out here, I can make it work. Right. So.
Randy, you mentioned a number. I'm sorry, Joe. You mentioned a number, 25%. And that 25% number, are you saying those are people that are considered diabetic, or that includes like the pre-diabetic?
That'd be pre, type 1, type 2 diabetes. And I think that number is somewhere around 88 million. 20 to 25%. I don't know exactly what the population of the United States is now. But it's a huge, huge number. And that might be low at 25%, but it is a massive number. And it's not getting any better. It's not going to get better. We're not, our diet is horrible. We see a lot of things that it's not safe in a lot of the urban areas to get out and play and exercise and do all these things. Our kids have gone in from, outside play to let's be on the video games more and more and more. And so that trend, even though, hey, my kids play video games too, I'm not knocking that, but that trend is just less time that they're outside running around playing ball or climbing a tree or digging a hole or whatever it is they want to do. And that just kind of escalates as it goes, higher and higher and higher. The whole year. So we're seeing more and more type 2s at the high school level now than has ever been seen. That's type 2, not type 1. That's type 2 because of the diet, the lack of exercise, and just the fact of the way things are now.
Yeah. Hey, so I know it can be difficult to break the science down because you can get really in the weeds and get really super technical. So you found this therapy. Can you explain what the therapy is, how it works, and on a layman's level, like for myself, just how does it work and how do you get the results you're getting right now?
So if a patient came into one of our clinics, let's just talk about it like that. So if a patient came into one of our clinics and they wanted to try our therapy, the patient would come in, they'd have an evaluation, we would draw labs, we would make sure they qualify, which would be their A1C would either prove out that they were hemoglobin A1C is a 90 to 120 day measure of where your glucose has been or your sugar has been over the last 3 or 4 months, and we would take a look and see what that is, and if you qualify, we'd finish out the consult, and typically that's 5.7 or higher. We would bring you in, talk about this is an IV therapy. This is a couple of times a week for multiple weeks. Our goal is to take you from being a patient that is resistant to insulin to being sensitive to insulin once again. Everybody, unless you're type 1, is typically sensitive to insulin from birth. But what happens is as you push more and more glucose into the body, the sensitivity of the receptors on the cell, and there's 56 trillion cells, all of which have multiple insulin receptors. So those receptors just kind of lay down So that way they're not, let's just say they're asleep. And so they're no longer able to use that insulin to bring into the cell, which allows glucose to come into the cell. And so when glucose comes into the cell, you get to burn that for energy. And when you burn glucose or sugar for energy, you get 36, 38 ATP once you get into some pyruvate and a few other things. But just from the glucose itself, it's around 36 ATP. If you're having
ATP is what now?
Energy, which is
it's energy. Okay.
Yeah.
So you get more energy from burning sugar
than you do from burning fat.
Got it. Okay.
And so when you're burning the fat, you're only going to get 3 ATP versus the 36 for one molecule.
That's a lot. That's a big difference.
Yeah, so you get a 12 difference, 12 times the difference. And when you're burning that fat, you're going to get cytokines and all kinds of inflammation and all this other stuff that's going on that causes problems. And so you want to burn glucose for energy. Your brain runs off of glucose. Your brain is made out of fat. So you have to have the glucose for your brain to function properly. So nonetheless, you're going to come into the clinic. We're going to sit you down. We're going to give you an IV. You'll be with us for about 2.5 hours, and we'll give you our solution, which is basically insulin and saline, and we're going to give that to you, and we'll deliver that the way the pancreas delivers it to you naturally. And that's basically it. It's not a big deal. It's not the insulin we buy straight over the counter at Walmart. There's nothing new about it. Insulin has been around since the 1920s or 30s. It's been given IV since the mid or early 1980s. It's FDA approved. Our pumps are FDA approved. We dilute it down with saline, all of which is FDA approved. It's all there.
Got it, Randy. I see people walking around with insulin pumps. Is it the same thing that
no,
a person carrying an insulin pump is?
So back in the in the beginning of COVID in March of 2020, the FDA, while everybody else was out in the middle of a fight for their life, determined that insulin was a hormone and not a drug. So insulin has always been a hormone. We've just delivered it as a drug. Meaning, if you look at any type of measurement that you deliver a hormone with, typically that's in micrograms, tiny doses, which is best used for those medications. And it may be with a pill or whatever, but typically it's very tiny doses. For what we've done in the past is we give that insulin as a drug, which would be what we call a medical field sub-Q or subcutaneous, which is just through the skin into the fat tissue, and we just inject. And if the patient didn't react enough, we just inject more. And by that injecting more and more and more is how that continued to become desensitized for the insulin. And I've explained this to several people recently. I was explaining it to someone who was a former Navy SEAL. I said, imagine the first time you ever had any alcohol. It didn't take a whole lot to get drunk. But the more and more you drank, the more and more it took to get you there. And he said, I understand that completely. I said, well, okay. Well, it's kind of the same thing with diabetes. The more insulin you take, the more insulin it's going to take to get your blood sugar regulated, because those receptors become desensitized to the insulin. And so they just kind of, like I said, in layman's terms, lay down, and they're not available to bring the insulin in. So therefore, you're not available to bring the sugar in. So you got to burn something else, which is the fat.
Yeah. And in my rudimentary knowledge of how all this works, I've heard of it described as a lock and a key, where you have the receptor as the lock, or it's the lock, and insulin is the key that has to attach to it to allow all these metabolic functions to proceed. Was that accurate, or?
That's very accurate. Very accurate.
Okay.
And without the insulin unlocking the quote unquote door, the glucose can't enter. And
then you can't make any energy.
That's right.
Randy, I've got a quick question here. So can we talk a little bit about results and sort of the intention of this particular therapy? So if, I'm hearing a lot about the science, and this is incredibly interesting in terms of that. But am I getting this right? This is not intended for someone to go in and continue to do it for the rest of their lives. This is intended for them to, get better and also maybe change their lifestyle. Because I'm seeing on your site, you've got, healthy eating guide and things like that. Can we talk a little bit about when someone is sort of like now saying, hey, this might be for me?
Right.
What can they hope to see in terms of a result and the sort of the time frame? I realize there's a lot that depends in there because there's a lot of ranges of how diabetic someone might be. But what can we talk about in terms of results for someone that might be interested in this?
So every result is different because every patient is different. I can't guarantee the same results for each patient because no matter how great our modality is, we cannot outwork someone's fork. Bottom line.
Okay.
I mean, that's just a fact. That's sorry. But the reality of it is if the patient comes in and will just try a little bit, we can see some pretty tremendous results. We have one clinic in particular where we have seen a tremendous amount of orthopedic patients. And the orthopedic docs in that area have found that if they will send them to us, we can get a patient ready to go to surgery within about 6 weeks. The patient comes in, they got an A1C of, let's say, 11, maybe 12, sometimes even higher. And they won't take them to surgery unless, it's between 7 and 8, sometimes it's 7.5 or less or whatever it is. And so we can bring that patient in and we'll tailor their therapy to get them ready to go within 6 weeks. Sometimes it may take a little longer, but most of the time we can have them ready to go in 6 weeks and have that A1C in that range the doc wants in that time frame.
Wow.
So not only are they improving as far as their A1C goes for surgery, but they are decreasing their chances of having post-op surgery complications. So that's one way that they're going to benefit. Number two, they're going to have a tremendous amount more energy because they're burning the right fuel. They're going to sleep better because they're, again, burning the right fuel. They're going to have less inflammation. Their blood pressure is going to go down because the inflammation is not just in their joints, it's also on their arterial system and their venous system. So that when that arterial system inflammation decreases, that allows the artery to expand and contract more, and therefore the blood pressure can go down. We've seen multiple times that we have to take patients off of blood pressure medication before we can start taking them off of diabetic medication because the inflammation is going down so much. We've had patients that come in and retinopathy is a problem, and their eyesight improves because you're improving the blood flow to the eyes. Again, in the beginning, I talked about the macrovascular pieces of what this does. This gets all the way through the bloodstream. It gets all the way everywhere. And so therefore allows the cell to burn the proper fuel so the cell can do what the cell is originally intended to do. And so when it has that fuel, it just starts everything to work again. So
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Very
We see
amazing.
patients who come in with ED problems. Those problems are improved. We've prayed people come in and they'll be diabetic and all of a sudden they'll be bald or whatever, and then they've got a head full of hair within 6 months. I'm like, that's
So this cures baldness, erectile dysfunction, and no, I know. I realize I'm getting into medical.
Cure anything. I am telling you what we see.
Exactly. I got you,
Telling
Randy.
you what we see.
This guy's chiming in on YouTube. I don't know if you guys have heard of this guy. His name's Dan Jourdan. He calls himself the Sales Energizer. We knew he would make an appearance in some way, shape, or form. Dan,
He used to have a podcast, didn't he, at one time?
right? I think so. So Dan, you've been replaced. This is already the most informative show ever. But Dan does have a question here. Can anybody get a clinic, or do you have to be a doctor?
No, you do not have to be a doctor, but this is, you have to have a medical director. Depending on your state, there's a lot of laws that go along with that kind of stuff. Depending on the state that you're in, corporate practice of medicine laws, those kinds of things, you have to have, there are certain different things, and to get deep into those weeds, just call us and we'll walk you through all that. But the bottom line is certain states allow you to own a clinic and then employ a physician. Other states may allow the physician to be 51% owner and you to be 49%. And other states may just say, no, there's no ownership except doctors. So to get into those weeds, we can certainly talk more about that offline, but that just depends on state and where you're at.
Gotcha. You know, obviously you talked about things that are positive for the patient, but let's get to the doctor part. Let's say, you know, I'm going to my family practice guy.
Sure.
What's the advantage for that guy?
So several things for the family practice physician, primary care, internal med. We've seen where those physicians typically can handle pretty much whatever's thrown at them. They do a great job taking care of a lot of vast different things. There becomes a time when they have to refer out to an endocrinologist, or they have to for the diabetes, or they have to refer out to, you know, something along those lines. And what we found is, as hard as it is to find a good primary care doctor, it's even harder to find an endocrinologist. Now, what I'm fixing to say does not replace an endocrinologist, don't misunderstand, but you've got to figure out something to help this patient in the time that you're waiting to get in to see the endocrinologist. When you've got them on all the right meds and you've got them on all the ADA standards and the patient's not moving, okay, and you can't get them into an endocrinologist, what are you going to do? Patient's suffering and you've got to do something. We come in and we put our modality in place. And again, we want to make sure that we're following the whole ADA structure and the standards of care. And then we add what we do on top of that. Then we start to see some movement in the patient. We start to see that A1C come down. We start to see these blood sugars move, daily average blood sugar move. We start to see the patient feel better. Their blood pressure comes down. All these other things start to happen. So therefore, that patient or that doctor now has something to help them while they're waiting to help out with the for the help from the endocrinologist. I know in my area, it can be as much as 6 months to get in to see an endocrinologist. So it's not an easy task to get a new patient in. So,
and then I'm sorry, Chris, if we switch that then to the endocrinologist, so we go from the primary care physician to now patient goes to the endocrinologist. How could you help the endocrinologist with this concept, this therapy?
Again, you know, we put this modality into their office, and they have something for their patients when they've done all they can do. That this is just a tool in their toolbox. This is just something that they have extra, which is again not a big deal as far as what it is or how it's given. That's a tool in their toolbox, and how we do it is the key. That they're not getting the answers that they need with the typical drugs, and we see all of those on TV commercials every night. They're not getting the results from the diet and exercise that they've asked their patients to do. They're not getting these things. They need something else. Maybe this is it. Maybe unlocking those key and resensitizing those cells to be able to accept insulin, and then allowing glucose into the cell is the answer. And that's what we can offer.
Gotcha. And then, you mentioned you had a cardiology background. Would this help a cardiologist too? I mean, is that a possibility?
Oh, yes.
I mean, you mentioned blood pressure, so I'm thinking cardiology and blood pressure.
Certainly. So we've had different scenarios that have turned out to be incredible in the cardiology aspect. We've seen my family member, for example, who was having to have a cath every 90 days. We were able to stretch him out to every year over the last couple of years. So he's had more energy, he's had less pain, his blood pressure's been better controlled, all these other things that we've been able to see with him. Now he's got some genetic issues that we can't overcome. So we're not God, we're not the be all fix all for everything out there. We're not the cure for diabetes, we're not a replacement for your pancreas, we're none of those things. But what we are is a tool in the toolbox for that cardiologist, the endocrinologist, the primary care doctor to say, hey, this is one more thing that we can do before we have to do something dramatic or drastic. And so we've seen, again, blood pressures improve, which is the bane of all cardiology. We've seen the vessels themselves, the endothelial lining. We see markers that show that that's improving. Again, the inflammation goes down, which is inflammation throughout the body. We see with improved energy, patients able to get up and walk and exercise, and they actually feel like they want to do that. Part of the problem with a diabetic person living with diabetes is not that they don't want to do that. Their body cannot make the energy needed to do that. There is a process issue. There is not a mental block. There's nothing that they just woke up and said, well, I got diabetes, I'm just going to lay here and not do anything. It's not going to happen. They cannot produce the energy necessary for their body to do it. It is physically not going to happen. They have to have something that's going to allow that glucose into that cell for that energy to function for them properly. The patient that comes home and sits on the couch and eats potato chips and is watching TV, that patient, in my mind, in my theory, they have to have those potato chips or those carbs because that's where their energy comes from. They are not getting it from sugar. That's why their blood sugar is so high. Okay? They have to have a way to get what's in their bloodstream into their blood cell.
And so is your body saying, hey, I need more, I just need that carbohydrate energy, and I'm not, even though my blood sugars are sky high, I still need that energy. So I'm still hungry.
Correct. And that's why the blood sugar continues to climb. They are exhausted. They have to have it. And so therefore, when you say, hey, go home and eat right and exercise, and they do, and they come back in 90 days and they've starved themselves and they've worked out or walked or they've done whatever it is, and there's no change. Why do you think that is? I, for so long, thought, well, this guy or this person
lazy,
is not
right? That's
exactly
right. You're lazy. You're not doing
not the case. It's not the case. The glucose cannot get into the cell. And the more insulin we push at them to give into the cell, the more resistant we make them to do that when you give that sub-Q. We give insulin, but it takes more insulin. When I take my treatment, it takes more of that solution to prime the tube than it does that I get for the entire 2 hours that I'm on the treatment.
So what's up? So when you're delivering insulin, that's super small dose.
Again, as a hormone, which is a tiny dose. Tiny dose. I get less than 1 unit of insulin over 1 or 2 hours.
And that is a small dose. That's a very small dose. That's a very small dose. Okay, so we covered cardiology, and we covered a little bit about, of all things, I would never have thought of orthopedic surgeons.
Yeah,
but I never would have thought that would have been an issue.
Well, from what we understand and some of the literature that we've read, and talking to some of the orthopedic surgeons, 20% of their cases go undone every year because they can't get their A1C down to a safe level to put them on the table to fix their hip or their knee.
And, say that again.
They can't.
Say that again. 20%.
Yeah, that's what we understand. They can't. Wow. They can't. The patient can't get better because the arthritic pain in their hip or knee or their shoulder is so bad. They're not going to do anymore. They can't do anymore. They can't walk. They can't exercise. They can't go out and do whatever. They can't go swim. It's not going to happen. We've got to figure out a way to drive that A1C down And we think, and we know from our patients that we've seen, we've got the answer to do that. And we can help a ton of orthopedic surgeons with this problem, and which increases their revenue and gives them a better outcome. We can help them get the patient on the table and decrease post-op infections. And we know that because the lower the A1C is, the more likely you are to have a good outcome. And we can lower the A1C.
Oh, that's a big, I mean, when you think of 20% of the people that can't get surgery but need it,
Yeah.
That's a
Now
really,
you understand that's
really
elective surgery. If there's a traumatic injury or something like that, they're going to take them on. They're not going to stop them for that. But we're talking about elective surgeries that allow
if my hip's hurting, it's still hurting.
Baseball. Oh yeah, you're still hurting. It allows your grandkids to go see the baseball game, with the grandkids. It allows the dad to walk, their daughter down the aisle or whatever it is. It's just, these are the things that are keeping patients from living their normal everyday life, and it's just all from diabetes.
Wow. A couple of other ones. I mean, these are kind of related, I guess. My doctor's always concerned about my kidneys. That's one of the big things. They're always asking, always trying to look at how my kidneys are functioning. I guess you call those nephrologists. So these doctors that do kidney work, how does that fit into the whole mix with diabetes?
So understanding that the kidney is a very high pressure organ, and about every time your heart beats, about 25% of the blood goes straight to the kidney.
Wow,
so it is a huge pressure system. So controlling blood flow into that afferent and efferent in and out of the kidneys is an enormous issue. We look at things like GFR, which is glomerular filtration rate. We look at creatinine levels, and we want to make sure that those levels really truly are under creatinine. We want them to be under 1. Docs really don't get too concerned until they get around 2. Some of them don't. I get concerned when they get over 1 because I'm looking to keep them out as far as I can. And GFR, we're trying to keep those above 60 and higher at all times. When you got a GFR that's approaching 15, you're starting to talk about a patient that's about to get on dialysis.
That's a bad day.
I've seen patients, sir.
That's a bad day, I said, when you have to go.
Oh, yeah, that's incredibly expensive and absolutely debilitating for the patient. You got to go to dialysis 3 times a week, and that's your life. I mean, you know what I'm saying? That's you're going to that, or you're not going to do well at all. And so we've seen patients that have a GFR in the upper 20s move back into the 40s, which is a long way from 15. And those conversations about dialysis now are postponed for quite some time when you can move them out of that range. When you can control their creatinine levels and their GFR levels, and those kidneys can be stable, you've got an opportunity for them to live a very healthy, successful life, and an opportunity for them to be productive through that life. I mean, there's living and then there's being alive, and I choose to live.
Yeah. Would it be too much to say that in that case you extended their life? Would that be a reach?
That would probably be a reach, but I would be able to say that you could potentially extend their quality of life.
Gotcha. The other thing I noticed just personally, right, when I got diagnosed with diabetes is tremendous brain fog. It's just like it was there constantly. It couldn't focus. I have problems focusing anyway, but it was much more noticeable. Is there a neurological component to this too?
Yeah, that's real. I mean, again, if you're burning something other than glucose or sugar for energy, then you are throwing off some kind of waste material that counteracts something else that you're doing. And in that case, you're burning fat. Well, inflammation is not just inflammation in your knee because you twisted your knee. That's one kind of inflammation. But the inflammation we're talking about is throughout the entire body. And that inflammation is on that arterial system and that venous system, which goes from the capillary bed all the way up to all the big arteries and the big veins. And if you got an artery that's this big, it's going to take a lot of inflammation to close that thing down. But if you've got a capillary that's, the size of a hair follicle, it don't take a lot to close that down. Well, that's what feeds the innermost parts of your brain, the smaller capillaries. And so, and also the same thing in your feet. If those capillaries in your feet clog up, guess what? You're going to wind up with a wound. If you got, peripheral neuropathy, well, you don't even feel it. You don't even know it's happening until it's too late. And so, in the brain, when you say, well, I forgot my keys, or it just takes you a minute to remember things a little longer than, well, that's just old age. No, that's not. That is, you're not burning enough glucose. You're burning fat instead, and there's probably some limited blood flow going there. And I'm not saying that that's, you just go up here, well, I'm just going to see the blood flow to my brain is good at measures. It's documented, it's there. Brain fog is real. The better control that you have over your diabetes, the better control that you have of that daily blood sugar, the less of that brain fog that you're going to have.
I've noticed
However, Joe, we can't fix you. We can't fix you.
That's what my wife said. All right. I think kind of the last one I got is, and this probably goes back to what you're talking about with these very small vessels. You talked about the eye. I mean, I would think an ophthalmologist would be even a candidate for this kind of.
So diabetic retinopathy. Yeah, diabetic retinopathy is a major, major deal. As we age, we have issues with cataracts and things like that, and that's protein building up on the backs of your eyelids, and that's a big deal. And everybody's going to have that if you live long enough, and you're going to have some cataract removal and things like that. That's one thing. But the blood flow to the eye with the diabetic retinopathy is a big deal. Some of the things that we've seen here is our patients kind of get upset with us. They come in and we tell them all the stuff that we're talking about today, and you can see some of these things. As you can tell, all my hair hasn't grown back by any means, but different things for different people. But we tell them, your eyesight has a good chance to improve. And they say, well, I've worn glasses for years, blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, that's fine. Just want to let you know this may happen. And then, people have their readers and they'll put them down here, or they'll put them on top of their head, or lay them over to the side. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden they could read the Chiron running across the bottom of the news channel. And they don't have their glasses on. That's typically when they come back and tell us, hey, something's going on with my eyes. And they put their glasses on and they can't read it because now their glasses are too strong. Again, blood flow is the healing piece of everything. And reduction in inflammation is the key to that as well. And we see that all the time. All the time. They get a little aggravated. Well, I don't got to buy new glasses. Well, do you? Because you just told me to read your Chiron without them. So,
Yeah. How dare you make my eyesight better? You hit my budget. Now I got to buy more glasses.
I know. You just go to the Dollar Tree and get you some.
Right.
Dollar readers now. Let's help you out, man. So yeah. So anyway, I mean, we see that, and our ophthalmologist that we talk with, an ophthalmologist. There's I've got my pastor's one of them. He said, I don't know what you're doing, but don't stop. Keep going wherever you're going. And how do I send some more people over there? That's what we see. I mean, they just improve. When you burn the right fuel, things get better. It's just amazing. So.
Randy, this is, it's incredible. I mean, just the stories you talk about and people getting healed and the potential for this therapy. I mean, how long? As we start to close this out, I'm like, how many clinics could you have in this country? I mean, it's just everything. Have you ever calculated that number?
Well, it's incalculable, quite frankly. We've got a lot going right now. We've got a lot more that we're in the process of rolling out. We've got opportunities with some pretty big deals out there, but it's easy to go out and just roll out a clinic. But we are more focused on making sure that we get the same results every time. Quality and safety of the patients are number one priority. Right. I'm just as I'm happy to open up a clinic, but if the safety's not there, the quality's not there, I haven't had to do this by any means, but I would certainly close one down at the same time if somebody was not doing what we needed to do as far as taking care of the patient. So I would not lose any sleep over that whatsoever. So we feel like the patient is the most important thing that we do, and everybody says that. Everybody says that this is patient. The things that they do are patient specific, and to a degree they are. But what we do is patient specific to every 15 minutes when we check your blood sugar. You know what I'm saying? We adjust what we're doing sometimes every 5 minutes, depending on what's going on with the patient. We are incredibly patient specific, and so therefore we have an opportunity to get to know our patients, and they become family.
I guess if you're sitting there for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, you're going to probably get to know that person pretty well.
Exactly. And so we experience that throughout the country. And we would love to have partners that want to have that type of relationship with the patients, and patients that want to have that type of relationship with their providers. We're not a primary care provider. That's not what we're doing. We're here to help and be an adjunct to primary care, and be an adjunct to endocrinology and orthos and these other people. We're not trying to, take anybody's primary care patients or nothing like that. We just want, we've got a way to help patients with diabetes, and we just want to let people know about it.
Gotcha. Where would they go from there, Randy? How would they get in contact with you if you're a doctor and you want to get a clinic, or you're a patient, you're trying to find one?
Yeah. So if you would go to our website at www.restormetabolics.com, it's right there on the bottom of the screen. Check us out, and some of our people will get right back in touch with you, and we can go from there.
Excellent.
Great. And Chris, I see you got a phone number here on the website as well. We'll put that up, right. 832-847-6612. And for those listening, that is 832-847-6612, Restore Metabolics. Randy, this has been awesome. I don't think I've ever been on Dan's show where I've had this much insightful information, taking nothing away from any of the previous guests and taking everything away from Dan. This has been a fantastic show. You're doing great work, sir. And
thank you, sir.
That's incredible. And I did notice and you mentioned this earlier, that that 25%, it's predominantly southeast, and there is a number of clinics that you've got here, and in looking at all of the locations that are based in the southeast.
Yes,
and are you looking to expand that, west and north as well? Okay,
absolutely.
Great. All right. So those of you who are watching and listening, and this is of interest to you, you've got the information here. Restore Metabolics. That's RESTOR, and Metabolics is spelled METABOLIX. Randy, this has been awesome. Joe, let's just replace.
I'm coming back next week. I'm coming back.
He couldn't resist, though. Dan could not resist showing up, of course, and being part of it. And the only thing he really wanted was this. It was the arms in the air, and we brought that. We brought the energy. So, ladies and gentlemen, thanks again for being a part of this show today. And again, great work, Randy. And I guess we'll sign off and just say, go get them today.